that. According to a newly unsealed document, Virginia Giuffre was paid $500,000 to settle a claim against Jeffrey Epstein and any other person she might have named in her lawsuit.
The confidential settlement is at the heart of Prince Andrew's bid to have Ms Giuffre's sexual abuse case against him dismissed, which will be decided today by a judge. I think it's about 3 o'clock our time today.
Yeah. And ahead of the critical hearing, our royal editor, Camilla Tominey, is joining us to explain what it can mean for the Duke of York. Good morning and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you both.
Thanks for joining us. So, can you give us a bit of background here and tell us about the court documents unsealed last night?
OK, so this court document was signed in 2009 when Virginia Roberts, as she was then, she's now Giuffre because she's married, signed this agreement with Jeffrey Epstein that she would receive $500,000, which is about £360,000, to settle her case against him. And in that agreement, she also agrees not to pursue in a court of law any of his agents and other people. And so what the Duke of York's team are going to rely on today in New York at this hearing is to say this case, which she has brought as a civil claim, it's not a criminal claim, it's a civil one, for damages against the Duke of York. She claims that she was forced to have sex with him on 3 separate occasions when she was 17. He vehemently denies those claims. So his team is going to go in and say she doesn't have a right to sue him because she signed this agreement back in 2009, agreeing not to go after any of Epstein's associates. That could work, but the legal opinion on it differs because the agreement is so broad, it doesn't even mention the Duke of York, doesn't make any reference to royalty. So is it so general that he can rely on it or so general that he can't? That's the point of law that's going to be debated today.
Is that by one judge?
So that's by one judge, Judge Kaplan. But we have to see this in the context, don't we, of Ghislaine Maxwell's recent conviction. How does that change things for the Duke of York? Well, yes, this is going to be decided on specific points of law. Does this settlement stand? What does it mean? And does it give the Duke of York, in inverted commas, a get-out-of-jail-free card when it comes to this particular action? But is the judge going to be minded to let this case go to trial because Ghislaine Maxwell has been found guilty and there are lots of survivors out there that want their day in court and they want to be listened to? And also in the post-Me Too era, we're very much in favour, aren't we, of women who are claiming historical abuse being heard.
Well, it's part of the healing process, isn't it?
Precisely. Having said that, whatever we might think of the Duke of York, whether we think he's pompous or arrogant or stupid or not perhaps the best representation of the monarchy, that doesn't de facto make him a paedophile without that actually being proven in a court of law. And this case is going to be difficult. Let's just think back for a moment to the Newsnight interview, which I think we've got some VT of, which we'll run in a second. You know, he tried to defend himself in that interview with Emily Maitlis, didn't he? He made a number of claims. I couldn't have been there on the night that this woman claims in London because I was at Pizza Express in Woking. Yeah. I don't sweat, so how could I have been in a nightclub? Let's just have a look at that now.
She was very specific about that night. She described dancing with you and you profusely sweating and that she went on to have bath, possibly...
There's a slight problem with the sweating because I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time. On that particular day that we now understand is the date, which is the 10th of March. I was at home. I was with the children. I'd taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking for a party.
I mean, we all remember that interview.
Yeah, it's still a bit nuts, isn't it, to rewatch it? But the point is, none of those claims against each other are necessarily going to be tried unless it does go to trial. So if the judge decides, OK, she signed this agreement, that basically exempts her from suing the Duke of York, this is over, we won't hear any of these claims on both sides challenged. We won't hear the Duke of York say, well, I don't sweat and I wasn't at that nightclub and blah, blah, blah. And we won't hear her claims either.
Is that done then? If
the case is dropped, it's done. But then the big question...
Either way, it doesn't bode well for Prince Andrew, does it?
Exactly. In the court of public opinion, this man's already been found guilty of a gross error of judgment in maintaining a friendship not only with Epstein, after he was convicted and released from prison. He went to see him in New York after that moment.
Yeah.
But he went to New York to tell him that he didn't want to be his friend anymore.
I know, but, you know, quite, OK? And there's many people in royal circles that said that was a catastrophic error, and I think the Duke now understands that himself, although he didn't at the time. But also, his relationship with Maxwell now, you know, why was he close to these two people that were clearly morally and now we've found criminally corrupt, regardless of any appeal that Maxwell might make? So this is then about him and his future. Well, what future does he have in the royal family if his reputation is shot to pieces? His team wants to exonerate him in a court of law and then clear his name and then rehabilitate his image. But what does he do next? What would this morning viewers want him to do? You know, he's got these military ties, he's cut all of his charitable sort of associations. And yes, he was a pilot in the Falklands War, so maybe there is a future role for him. But as the Queen herself has always said, you know, we exist for as long as our subjects want us to be here. And this is going to be dependent, I would imagine, on public opinion wanting him to either resume his role or not.
Camilla, can he not leave the house now? Is he just, like, got to stay in the palace?
He lives in Royal Lodge in Windsor, which is a home he still shares with Fergie, the Duchess of York. Even though they're divorced, they still kind of, like, exist as husband and wife in all but name. He goes out and about and is photographed in his Range Rover driving through Windsor Great Park. He's still extremely close to his mother and has been supporting her because she didn't go to Sandringham at Christmas, so we'd imagine they saw each other.
And how does he earn money?
Well, indeed, like the Queen is paying his legal bills. He doesn't have a capacity to earn money, apart from the fact that people watching this will think, well, you've got a lovely mansion in the middle of Windsor, which you're not paying a particularly large amount for because it was previously the Queen Mother's house. But, I mean, he is in this kind of state of suspended animation. Like, he can't clear his name, and therefore, what does he do? He can't go back to public life until he clears his name.
His team almost... I mean, obviously they want this to be dropped, but if this does go to a civil court, does that give him a chance in his team's mind to therefore clear his name?
Yes. So
but then what I don't understand is how can this be proven one way or another? I mean,
well, it's really hard, isn't it? Because this happened years and years and years ago. His team have always claimed that there are inconsistencies in Virginia Giuffre's testimony, but at the same time, do they want to be seen as being victim-blaming?
Right.
Because there's no doubt at all that she was a victim of Epstein and indeed, by association now, Maxwell. The question mark is whether she was a victim of the Duke of York.
Yeah.
And regardless of what we think of him, at the moment he hasn't been found guilty of anything in a court of law, which is important to note. You know, it's all very well what the Twitter sphere says, and not there's no smoke without fire. But, you know, a man can be pompous and arrogant and not be a paedophile.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the seriousness of what he's accused of. Of course he has his right to defend himself.
Yeah.
How damaging is this on a wider scale to the royal family, or do you not think it is?
Well, I think that the Queen sort of remains sacrosanct on the throne because people feel sorry for her. She lost her husband last year, makes it happen. They had to endure the Oprah Winfrey interview. I've just written in the last few days she's lost 2 of her ladies in waiting who were close confidants. You know, it's been another annus horribilis. I think if this goes to trial, 2022 isn't shaping up to be particularly clever either. I mean, they'll be desperately hoping that this judge throws this out, but I think it's 50-50 on that.
And what about Ghislaine Maxwell? Could she strike a deal in prison, maybe?
Well, her brother has apparently said and told the newspapers that she's not interested in striking any deal, and it's always been suggested to me when I've asked around this issue, you know, would she sell out the Duke of York, that no, because actually their relationship was closer than his with Epstein. It was she that introduced the Duke to Epstein. And that's how that friendship formed. And she's somebody who has always kind of traded on her close connections with very influential people. And I would suggest that the Queen's second son is probably the most influential of her contacts. So I'm not sure she'd want to burn him even if she's in prison.
Fascinating.
Fascinating stuff. We'll be watching for later.
Camilla.
No worries at all.
Thanks.
That was amazing.